Joining the 700 Club. This is a 700 milligram dose of DPH taken at night in a dimmed room. Anyways, I'll start with the first time I joined the 700 Club. I took 700 milligrams of DPH at night with the lights dimmed. I laid in my bed, and after not too long, the first physical effects take hold. I get up and I notice it feels like gravity was turned up 50 times. It's very hard to move, and it feels like you're carrying weights on your ankles. The second physical effect I noticed was a rapid drying of the mouth and mucous membranes, and slightly upset stomach, but that's from eating 24 pills. Slowly, the cognitive effects and other physical effects begin to take hold. The physical effects experienced at this point are the previous ones, only more intense, and total loss of fine and gross motor control, slurred, incoherent speech, sensitivity to light, sound, and especially sun stimuli, like it's 10 times easier to jump and get startled, and often happens from the hallucinations, strange sensations of electric shock. I had my laptop battery on the bed, and I was totally convinced it had shocked me, extreme sedation, often to the point where you can't keep your head up even while walking. So, as if the frequent urination isn't enough, it's also a stop-and-go deal, meaning you have to force it out in short bursts even though it seems like you could stand there forever. This is also another thing I don't see many people discuss, and I'm not entirely sure the reasoning behind it, but every time I look at the toilet, it had more intense visual static and movement than any other object, and this was very consistent during the 7 times I did it. The toilet bowl was just buzzing with movement and visual snow/black dots. Alright, so I get back in my room and I lay down and I see a rat in my closet. So I start freaking out because I see this solid rat and I keep blinking and it's still there. So I go to the other room dizzy and confused, trying to find my cat because it seemed logical at the time to bring my cat in to take care of the rat. Anyways, I thought I saw my cat, but it was a shadow of the lamp. I then fell down and slowly regained my balance. Once I got back to my bedroom, the rat was still there, so that really was freaking me out. But for some reason, I guess I sort of forgot about it because I laid back down. Then I remembered it and looked over, and the rat was a damn slipper. I then realized I just tried to chase down my cat to get rid of a hallucination. So I'm like this, fuck this shit, and dose out into a rapid REM-like dream state that is extremely vivid, to the point where when someone talks to you and expects you to respond, you often answer in real life, and as a result snap back into reality, often finishing a jumbled, nonsensical sentence. This repeats itself over and over, one vivid microsleep hypnagogic state after the other, until either a hallucination wakes you up or you have to piss. These REM-like microsleep daydreams are very similar to the hallucinatory states found on LSA, but instead of lucidity, it's delirium. They are different than hallucinatory states found on other drugs like ayahuasca, however, as they didn't seem to draw on concepts that weren't already present in a person's life, and usually it's everyday actions and conversations, as opposed to the wild and mystical landscapes of other hallucinatory states. When you weren't flipping through mundane situations in a completely realistic way, you were staring at the ceiling because it caused more intense visual drifting than psychedelics do, however, many times more blurry and ill-defined. Due to this blurriness, it appears to be more death-defying. However, psychedelics produce a greater form of this distortion. The DPH form is more noticeable, and I guess you'd say realistic. This is also accompanied by objects drifting from their present location and totally shifting and distorting form and shape in an extremely fluid fashion. This is also accompanied by wild flowing of wood grain and certain textures. This again, while isn't as intricate and detailed as psychedelics, was more noticeable, inescapable, and realistic. Picture frames would also wildly bend and distort in a fluid fashion that's more similar to mushrooms than LSD or DXM. I haven't even gone to the spiders yet. I have seen so many forms of different spiders on DPH. One time a yellow/black spider came down right in front of my face, just floating midair. And of course, there's the famous black dots that race across non-stop that people like to call spiders. These dots look exactly like the black dots you see when you get lightheaded and see stars, as they call it. I've seen these dots cover entire surfaces, and they dance about in a very random pattern. And the thing is, that isn't like most other hallucinations. You can stare at these dots and follow them with your eyes, and they never really go away. One thing I have to say though, is DPH probably has the absolute worst HPPD of the other hallucinogens. After 7 times I took it, nearly 2 years before I stopped seeing spots and visual snow constantly in my vision, and even then, it pretty much just got replaced by LSD HPPD. I can still see the snow if I really look, especially if I'm high. I have also seen my brother morph out of the top corner of my ceiling in full realism, had my mother walk in even though my friend owned the house I was in, so I was naturally like, what the fuck are you doing here? I don't smoke cigs, but I've had phantom bowls. Oh, and another one of the weirdest hallucinations I get on DPH, and this is a big one. I have a TV that doesn't even have cable plugged into it in my bedroom, and this is pretty consistent for me. I remember laying there consistently watching TV a great deal with full audio that seemed to sync up with the visual broadcast. That one always got me when I did DPH. Another one is flying insects, like mainly wasp. I always saw wasp. They would swarm and buzz and pounce at my ceiling, and I even heard them also. The thing with DPH is the hallucinations freaked me out so much, I got into the habit of using a camera to take pictures to verify if it's even real. And on at least one occasion, I hallucinated the hallucination in the picture as well, because the next day, I looked at the same pic and it was blank. I've also walked into rooms and just stood there blanking out into nothingness. Okay, I can actually handle and enjoy the solid, indifferentiable reality from hallucinations, and I enjoy the almost psychedelic-like distortions, but what I cannot stand is the physical and cognitive effects. The visuals, however, are pretty neat. I just wish it didn't have those other effects attached. Those include total lack of emotion, like I'm not totally terrified of the hallucinations because I have like a poker face the entire time, and its total lack of emotion at best. The whole impending doom and depression thing, I took such high doses that I was so zoned out I was pretty much a zombie. I was barely really in my body enough to feel it. I also get very high auditory hallucinations. I think the only thing that can even come close in terms of auditory effects was 25C N-bomb or San Pedro, mescaline. Actually, I remember how my trips used to go usually on DPH. I would get the micro sleep, then hallucinatory states, then dysphoria made it so I couldn't stand it. But eventually, there was a point where dysphoric effects went away, but the hallucinations were still present. But, by the way, this drug has a terrible hangover. It leaves you feeling edgy, lethargic, and drained the whole next day, and it kind of reminds me of a stimulant come down. But the day after, I would also often break out into swarms of black dots. I felt normal the day after that, though.